What's going on, guys? It's Jimmy here, and welcome to the Daily Dirt. The fate of the Senate, whether it's going to stay Republican or go Democrat, will be determined tonight. And tomorrow, the fate of the election and the presidency are going to possibly be determined if they can finalize this tomorrow night. However, there's a large group of over 100 Republicans in the House and the Senate that are threatening to object and contest the election results that need to be certified tomorrow by Congress. Let me show you what some of them are saying, and then you can let me know your thoughts and opinion. First, we're going to hear from Republican Senator Ted Cruz.
Senator Ted Cruz is leading a group of 11 senators who will object unless a commission is named to investigate allegations of fraud. Senator Ted Cruz joins me right now. Senator, great to have you this morning. Happy New Year to you. Why are you doing this, and how will this play out?
Well, good morning, Maria. Happy New Year as well. Thanks for having me. Look, we're at an extraordinary time in our country's history. We went into this election with the country deeply divided, deeply polarized, and we've seen in the last 2 months unprecedented allegations of voter fraud. And that's produced a deep, deep distrust of our democratic process across the country. I think we in Congress have an obligation to do something about that. We have an obligation to protect the integrity of the democratic system. And so this past week, I spent writing out a position and assembling a group that ultimately of 11 senators that we put out yesterday that we will together object to certification in order to force the appointment of an emergency electoral commission to perform an emergency audit of the election results to assess these claims of frauds. I think we can do that. We can do it promptly. We can do it in 10 days before the inauguration. But I think we have an obligation to the voters and we have an obligation to the Constitution to ensure that this election was lawful.
You mentioned the allegations of fraud, and in the press release announcing this commission that you'd like to see, you report on a Reuters Ipsos poll that says 39% of Americans believe the election was rigged. That belief held by Republicans, 67%, Democrats, 17%, and independents, 31%. But, Senator, we know that we heard from Bill Barr, and he said he didn't see fraud. We know that we heard from the states, and we also know that we heard from the Supreme Court, who did not hear the attacks and the cases that said there was fraud. How do you respond to that?
Well, each of those different players has a different role in our constitutional system. Bill Barr was speaking as to the evidence the Department of Justice saw. The Department of Justice wasn't administering any elections, did not have access to particularly widespread evidence on either side of the issue. As for the states, there are a lot of people in the states and state legislatures who've expressed deep, deep concerns about the unlawful practices that we saw on Election Day, that we saw particularly cities controlled by Democratic politicians shutting down the vote, throwing out observers, disregarding the law. And finally, you mentioned the Supreme Court. Listen, I wish the Supreme Court had taken this case. There were two opportunities to take this case, one out of Pennsylvania, one out of Texas. In both instances, the lawyers asked me to argue those cases. And so with regard to the Texas case, President Trump called me and said, Ted, would you do the oral argument in this case if the court takes it? I told the president, absolutely, I'd be happy to do it. I wish the court had taken one or both of those cases. I think the Supreme Court would be a better forum for resolving those issues. That obviously was the forum we resolved issues similarly in 2000 in Bush versus Gore. Unfortunately, the court declined to take those two cases, so we don't have the court stepping in to resolve it. And that's why I think Congress has a responsibility. We have an independent obligation to the Constitution. We have an independent obligation to the rule of law. And the question, look, we've got to vote on January 6th on certification. And every member of Congress faces a dilemma. Frankly, two pretty lousy choices. One, we can vote to certify, not consider any objections. If we do that, that will be heard by a lot of Americans as saying we don't think voter fraud is a real concern. We don't think these claims should be investigated thoroughly. I know that's not what most of us believe. But secondly, and I think all of us rightly don't want to be in a position where we're suggesting setting aside the results of an election just because the candidate that we supported didn't happen to prevail. That's not a principled constitutional position. That's why in assembling this group of 11 senators, I was looking for a third option, an option that was really moored in the law. And so I'll tell you what I did, Marie. I went back and looked at the historical precedents. I think the strongest precedent is the presidential election of 1876, Hayes versus Tilden. In that election, there were serious allegations of fraud in 3 different states, in Florida, in Louisiana, and in South Carolina. And what did Congress do in 1876? Now, they didn't throw up their hands and say, well, gosh, we've got allegations of fraud, but we can't do anything about it. We've just got to certify. No, they didn't do that.
Yeah.
What they did instead is they appointed a commission. It was called an electoral commission, consisted of 5 House members, 5 senators, 5 Supreme Court justices. They considered evidence, they examined the ballots, and they made a determination based upon what the disputed ballots and what the outcome should be. What I'm arguing for is Congress ought to do the same thing. We ought to have a fair inquiry, a fair audit into these results, and we ought to resolve these claims, not just dismiss them out of hand.
What kind of pressure are you facing right now? We know that Mitch McConnell does not want any objection. We also know that Liz Cheney is telling her colleagues, why are we doing this? This is a waste of time. Don't do it. We shouldn't be putting ourselves out there. We also heard from Senator Klobuchar. She said, get a grip. Lisa Murkowski said we should not be doing this. And you know that you will require both the House and the Senate to reject the electors from a number of states in order to be successful. That's likely not happening, that you're going to win in both the House and the Senate. And what if a commission does find fraud? What happens then?
Mm-hmm. Well, listen, I think everyone needs to calm down. I think we need to tone down the rhetoric. This is already a volatile situation. It's like a tinderbox and throwing lit matches into it. And so I think the kind of hyperbole we're seeing, the kind of angry language, yesterday when I released my statement with 10 other senators, I had multiple Democrats urging that I should be arrested and tried for the crimes of sedition and treason. Now, look, that's not helpful. At a time when this country, when we're pitted against each other, just relax and let's do our jobs. We have a responsibility to follow the law. And let me say, by the way, to those members who may not have a concern about this election, whether you're a Democrat or even some Republicans, the poll numbers you covered at the top of the show, I think ought to be deeply troubling to everyone. 39% of Americans think, quote, the election was rigged. And that includes 17% of Democrats, 31% of independents. That's bad for our democracy. That's bad for the legitimacy of any subsequent presidential elections. And so dismissing these claims, I think, does real violence to our democratic system. We ought to have a serious, fair process and tribunal to consider these claims, consider them quickly, consider them expeditiously. We can do it in 10 days before the inauguration. I think that would take major steps towards reestablishing trust in our democratic process. And I believe that should be a bipartisan objective. We may be too divided today for that to happen, but Democrats should be interested in Americans having confidence in our electoral system just as much as Republicans should be.
Yeah.
Now, since then, we have over 140 Republicans from both the House and the Senate that say that they are going to object to the certification process of the Electoral College tomorrow on January 6th for the election. And the question is, will they be able to contest the election completely? Let me know your thoughts down below in the comments. Do you think what Ted Cruz was saying is reasonable? Do you think they should set up a committee to look into this, to see if there was actual problems on a large scale? The problem is now we're so close to Inauguration Day being 2 weeks away. Is it too late? Is it too far too late? Let me know your thoughts down below. Do you think this is a widespread problem, or do you think they should just certify the results of the Electoral College that has already proclaimed and certified Biden as the winner, but now Congress has to go and actually certify this process next? If Congress doesn't certify this process, then we could see a contested election. Vice President Mike Pence is the person in charge of this hearing. It goes historically to the vice president, who's Mike Pence, who's kind of the, Donald Trump's vice president. And yeah, Donald Trump actually said in a recent interview that he expects Mike Pence to help him out.
And I hope Mike Pence comes through for us, I have to tell you. I hope that our great vice president comes through for us. He's a great guy. Of course, if he doesn't come through, I won't like him quite as much.
So yeah, let me know what you think is going to be happening down below in the comments. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to this, our new channel, The Daily Dirt. Click the bell icon if you want to get notifications when we go live. We don't have a set schedule yet, but me and my wife will be hosting videos going forward. Also, you can click this video, which is my newest stimulus check video about the $2,000 stimulus checks coming out on our main channel, the It's Jimmy channel. And this is my newest video on The Daily Dirt. Don't forget to subscribe, and I will see you in the next video.